The letter was small, folded unevenly, and slipped from the red mailbox outside the mall like it didn't belong among the shiny envelopes addressed in perfect cursive. It landed near the boots of a man who hadn't felt wonder in years. When he picked it up, he had no idea that a child's handwriting would crack open a heart worth billions. Ethan Cross was known for buying companies the way other people bought coffee. He was the billionaire whose name glowed on skyscrapers, whose interviews were clipped and careful, whose face never betrayed emotion. That December evening, he stood alone in a quiet corner of the mall, waiting for his driver, watching families line up to see Santa. The laughter, the cheap tinsel, the off-key carols all felt distant to him, like a movie he'd once watched but never lived. That was when he noticed the letter. It was addressed simply to Santa, North Pole. The return address was written in shaky pencil, with a little heart drawn beside the name Lily. Ethan didn't know why he opened it. Maybe it was the childlike trust in the handwriting. Maybe it was the way his own chest felt hollow that night. "Dear Santa," the letter began. "My name is Lily. I am 7 years old. I tried to be very good this year, but sometimes I cry when Mom thinks I'm asleep. Please don't be mad." Ethan felt a tightening in his throat. "I don't need toys this Christmas. I just want my mom to have a job again. She says she's trying really hard, but people don't call her back. She pretends she's okay, but I hear her praying at night. If you can't find her a job, please help her not be sad anymore. I will share my cookies." At the bottom was a crooked drawing of a woman holding a little girl's hand beneath a star. Ethan stared at the paper until the noise of the mall faded away. His vision blurred. He had signed contracts that moved millions without blinking, but this letter made his hands tremble. He thought of his own childhood, of Christmases spent in silence after his mother passed away, of a father who believed tears were weakness. He had grown up fast, built walls higher than any tower bearing his name. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. Across town, in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a heater that rattled through the night, Lily sat at the small kitchen table coloring while her mother, Maria, stared at her laptop. The screen glowed with rejection emails, each one polite, each one cutting deeper than the last. Maria had lost her job 8 months earlier when the company downsized. Since then, she had sent out hundreds of applications, taken short-term work cleaning offices at night, and skipped meals so Lily wouldn't notice how little there was. She smiled when Lily looked up, because mothers always do. That night, after Lily fell asleep clutching her worn stuffed bear, Maria let herself cry. She prayed quietly, not for riches or miracles, just for a chance. For dignity. For a way to stop feeling like she was failing the one person who depended on her. The next morning, Ethan Cross sat in his office staring at the same letter. He hadn't slept. The words followed him like an echo. He could have written a check, funded a charity, handed the problem to someone else. He'd done that before. But something about this felt different. This wasn't about saving face or making headlines. This was about one mother, one child, and a promise whispered into the dark. He called his assistant and asked for a list of job openings across his companies. Not executive roles. Real jobs. Positions that kept the lights on and the fridge full. Then he asked something no one had heard him ask before. Find Lily. It wasn't easy. The letter had no last name, no clear address. But Ethan's team worked through postal routes, local schools, community centers. They followed the trail of a child's hope. 3 days before Christmas, Maria answered a knock at the door she didn't expect. 2 people stood in the hallway, dressed simply, smiling kindly. They asked if she was Lily's mother. Her stomach dropped. She thought of unpaid bills, of mistakes she might have made. They explained they were from a company that had received a letter meant for Santa. Maria covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. They told her about an interview. Not a promise. Just an opportunity. A real one. With benefits. With stability. Maria nodded, barely able to speak, her heart pounding with equal parts hope and fear. The interview was scheduled for the next day. Maria didn't sleep that night either. She ironed the same blouse twice. Lily asked why she was smiling so much, and Maria hugged her tightly, whispering thank you over and over. The interview was different from any she had known. There were no cold stares, no rushed questions. They asked about her skills, her experiences, her goals. They listened. When it ended, Maria felt something unfamiliar. Respect. 2 days later, her phone rang. She got the job. Maria sank to the floor, crying openly this time. Lily thought something was wrong until her mother laughed through tears and pulled her into her arms. They danced in the living room, laughing and crying together, the heater rattling in applause. On Christmas Eve, Lily was invited to a special event at a local children's center. She thought it was a party. She wore her favorite dress, the one with the tiny stars. When they arrived, the room was warm and glowing, filled with lights and laughter. Santa was there. So was Ethan Cross. He stood off to the side at first, watching Lily's face light up as she ran toward Santa. When she handed over a cookie, when she laughed, when she hugged her mother with the pure joy of a child whose wish had been answered, Ethan felt something break and heal all at once. Later, Santa asked Lily if she wanted to meet someone special. She nodded shyly. Ethan knelt in front of her, suddenly unsure of himself in a way no boardroom had ever made him feel. "I read your letter," he said softly. Lily tilted her head. "Are you Santa's helper?" He smiled, eyes shining. "Something like that." "Thank you for helping my mom," Lily said simply. "She smiles more now." Ethan couldn't speak for a moment. When he did, his voice shook. "Thank you for reminding me what matters." That night, Ethan went home to an apartment that no longer felt impressive. He sat alone with the letter and finally allowed himself to cry. Not quiet tears, not hidden ones. Real tears. For the child he had been. For the man he had become. For the choice he could still make. In the months that followed, Ethan changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but truly. He created programs focused on single parents re-entering the workforce. He spent time listening instead of directing. He showed up. Maria thrived in her new role. She worked hard, learned fast, and built a life that felt steady again. Lily grew taller, louder, happier. She still wrote letters to Santa, but now they were filled with drawings and stories, not worry. One evening, months later, Lily asked her mom if Santa was real. Maria smiled and said, "Sometimes Santa looks like people who decide to care." Far across the city, Ethan Cross looked at a framed letter on his desk, written in shaky pencil, with a little heart beside a name. It reminded him that the greatest wealth wasn't measured in numbers, but in moments when you choose kindness over indifference. And somewhere in the quiet of winter, a little girl slept peacefully, believing in miracles, not knowing she had created one. The weeks after Christmas moved differently, as if time itself had softened. For Maria, every morning no longer began with dread but with purpose. She woke before sunrise, brewed coffee that actually smelled rich instead of thin, and stood for a moment by the window, watching the city wake up. There were still challenges, still moments when fear crept in, but now they were no longer drowning her. She had ground beneath her feet again. Her new job wasn't glamorous. It was demanding, structured, and sometimes exhausting. There were deadlines, unfamiliar systems, and the quiet pressure of proving she deserved the chance she had been given. On her first day, Maria's hands shook as she logged into her computer. She worried that she'd forgotten how to belong in a professional world, that motherhood and hardship had somehow erased her competence. But as the hours passed, something old and strong stirred inside her. She remembered who she was before the world had knocked her down. She asked questions. She took notes. She stayed late, not because she was afraid, but because she cared. Lily noticed the change immediately. Her mother's shoulders were no longer slumped when she came home. The tiredness was still there, but it was a good tiredness, the kind that comes from effort instead of despair. Dinners became warmer, fuller. Sometimes they were simple meals, but they were shared with laughter. Lily began talking about school with excitement again, about friends, about dreams she hadn't dared to say out loud before. She drew pictures of her mom wearing a badge and standing tall, always with a bright yellow sun overhead. Yet life didn't magically become perfect. Bills still arrived. The car still made strange noises. Maria still worried about the future, about savings, about what would happen if something went wrong again. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Maria sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of envelopes. The fear returned, quieter than before, but persistent. She pressed her hands together and whispered a prayer, not out of desperation this time, but gratitude mixed with humility. She knew how quickly things could fall apart. She promised herself she would never forget what it felt like to be invisible. Across the city, Ethan Cross was fighting a different kind of battle. The boardroom felt colder these days. Not because of the temperature, but because Ethan was no longer the same man who sat at the head of the table. He listened more. He challenged decisions that prioritized profit over people. Some executives nodded politely. Others resisted. They reminded him of margins, shareholders, risks. They told him compassion was expensive. Ethan surprised them all by agreeing. "It is expensive," he said calmly. "But so is indifference. We've just been paying the wrong cost." Not everyone welcomed the shift. There were tense meetings, quiet opposition, and moments when Ethan questioned whether he was trying to rewrite a system too deeply rooted to change. Late at night, he found himself staring at Lily's letter again, grounding himself in its simplicity. He didn't need to save everyone. He just needed to stop ignoring those he could help. One afternoon, Ethan quietly visited one of the company's workforce development offices. He watched single parents attend training sessions, some nervous, some hopeful, all carrying stories heavier than their resumes. He spoke to them not as a billionaire, but as a listener. For the first time in years, his wealth felt like a tool instead of a shield. Back at home, Lily's teacher called Maria in for a meeting. Maria's heart jumped, old fear rushing in. But the teacher smiled warmly and explained that Lily had been helping other students, sharing her lunch, comforting classmates who were sad. When asked why, Lily had said, "Because my mom says people need help sometimes, and that doesn't mean they're bad." Maria cried all the way home. That night, she hugged Lily tighter than usual. Lily asked why, and Maria told her the truth, in words a child could understand. She said that asking for help was brave. That kindness could change lives. That one small wish could ripple further than you ever imagine. Spring came slowly, but it came. The apartment felt brighter. The air felt lighter. Maria began saving a little each month. Lily joined a school art club. Their laughter filled rooms that had once held only silence. And somewhere in a quiet office overlooking the city, Ethan Cross signed off on a new initiative and leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply. For the first time, success didn't feel lonely. None of them knew exactly what the future held. But they knew this much. Hope, once found, has a way of growing. And sometimes, the smallest voices start the loudest change.